Welcome to Bad Bosses, Great Leaders, the podcast exploring what it takes to lead with purpose. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Latasha Nelson. Dr. Nelson is an experienced learning architect and solutions expert committed to developing people-centric learning experiences that drive personal and organizational goals. She's spent most of her career in learning and development, and she's passionate about making sense of how we can all be better leaders in our own spaces. Her goal is to spark the leadership fire in all of us and challenge the belief that impact is only achievable through permission-based leadership. Latasha, welcome. I am so excited. This is a really special episode for me because you graciously had me on as a guest on your podcast, and you've been a great support and encourager for me over the last couple of months. And so I'm really pleased and honored and just proud to have you as a guest on this podcast. We're going to talk a lot about change management, but I know we'll talk a lot about leadership through change management. We'll talk about a lot because I know we covered a lot of ground on leadership before. And so I've been waiting for this moment, this recording, this day, and I'm so excited for our audiences to get to know you too. So do you want to share a little bit about yourself and what brought you into the field of leadership and the learning experiences around all that good stuff? Feel free to share. What brought you to this moment? Yeah.
No, I appreciate it. And thank you so much for having me. So, again, very special moment right now because I remember you were one of my very first guests. And all I kept thinking was, can she tell I've only done this maybe once or twice?
I couldn't. I couldn't.
Okay, just keep a straight face. You're okay. Game face. Oh, and editing is a beautiful thing. So if you sound like a newbie, because I was totally a newbie, and you were such an awesome guest. So I am just privileged to be able to join your audience today and you and everything that you're doing. So I know this is going to sound like the start of a very long story, but it's not, I promise. I go all the way back to my parents. I attribute what I've seen and how I've become a leader, whether, I've had titles or not, to my parents. And of course, hindsight being what it is, I look back at all of the things they were doing to lead us that I didn't have a name for, a label for, really didn't understand it strategically, just kind of figured they were just doing the best they could with 6 kids running around. Like, who does that on purpose, anyways? So I go back and I think about some of the things that my parents had to navigate and some of the ways that they had to show up, the integrity behind everything that they did, the how they promoted honesty through modeling the behaviors that they expected to see in us, and how that carried over into my career and my family. So another moment of full transparency. I have just started sharing this more openly with people, but I had my oldest in high school. So I was a teenage mom. And very interestingly, um, for I also had a daycare at my high school, right? So, very statistically, very few expecting very much from me because of the expectations of, inner city kid, high school. Is she likely to graduate? Who knows, right? That type of situation. Not likely is the expectation. And so, my parents, again, very supportive, leaning into each of us, each of the 6 of us who are very different, the way that we needed to be leaned into, was another awesome leadership, you know, characteristic that I saw in them. You have to meet people where they are. You have to bring people along. You have to make decisions ultimately. Like, you have to own the fact that you are the decision maker, but you need to welcome the different voices and the diversity of experiences, because to meet my family is an experience. Okay. Again, you've got all these different personalities, and somehow out of just one immediate family, it's an entertaining sight to see. So it really goes back to my parents. And along the way, I have had some amazing people really invest a ton of things in me, opportunities that I can only look back and say, this is by the grace of God that this happened, that he was clearly looking out for me when I did not know it, because I had people who were my high school counselors who said, "Hey, here's an opportunity for you. All I need you to do is fill out this application. I got the rest of it." Right? People who said, "Hey, you know what? I think you would be a great fit for our team. Fill out this application. I'll take care of the rest of it." Right? People who have said to me, I used to be a teacher, "Hey, I am moving to a different state and I need people like you on my team." So I know it's me asking you to uproot your entire family, but if you'd consider it, I'd love to have you come with me to lead this other team, to lead this vision. So, my experience has been across multiple industries, and it still comes back to what started at home.
I love that so much. And I know for you, for myself, our faith is what grounds us, and what a true testament to that provision and that guidance that you've been able to follow faithfully. So just what a wonderful story, Latasha. And I appreciate you sharing that. And your transparency, I hope, will help others who might be in some challenging situations and they feel like the world doesn't support them or see the potential. And what a great reminder that there are people out there who are gracious and will come alongside us and encourage us and give us those opportunities if we stay faithful and resilient. And you build up so much resilience, and that's something that I think might be a theme, feels like a theme when it comes to change management is having that resilience, because such an early age you had to deal with changes that you weren't sure how were going to play out and how you're going to navigate that. And for anyone, I think that can be really daunting. Change is hard, right? I think that's fair to say. So, can you share a time in your professional life where you've had to help pivot through change or adapt to that understanding and build up that resilience?
Absolutely, absolutely. The last couple of years, you've seen a lot of headlines. Companies are making changes, and that's necessary, right? It's not only constant, but it's necessary, and especially nowadays because disruption is the new thing, right? There is no such thing as I know exactly what to do because what I've done before worked. There's no such thing as okay. There's a guarantee that what I learned before that worked in the circumstances before will work for me now. And so I've had the privilege of leading a team of learning professionals that I absolutely adore. That is my little mini family. And we've seen a lot of things, especially when you're seeing change happen around you. So there's one thing for change to happen to you. And when you're doing it, when you're experiencing that, and that change is happening not just to you, but other people you care about and your leaders and the people you support, the that's a massive body of change you have to navigate, but when you're not affected and change is happening around you, there is still change that you have to manage, especially as a leader. You have to help your team navigate the changes that are happening around you, and so for the last couple of years, we've watched our organization make adjustments to help empower the future of the company, and that's brought up a lot of questions from my team. Should I be concerned? Should I be looking for a new job? Is it gonna hit us? What should I be thinking about? What should I be doing? And one of the things I'm very, very mindful of is keeping us grounded in the present and the future. Right now, this is what's in front of us and it's not going away. So let's make sure we're not losing focus of the impact that we can have and the value we need to add right now in this moment. But future state, how do I make sure that if for some reason, because I don't have a crystal ball either, is on back order, the good ones anyways, what should I be doing to prepare myself to be future ready, future fit, right? And so oftentimes with my team, we've had opportunities to not just look at how we add value in the moment and how that value can then be used in the event that that change hits me personally to help me get to where I need to go in my next phase of life. But also that future fit piece is like in 2 years, in 3 years, what skill set is going to be so needed, and I'm so ahead of the curve already because I thought about that right now, right? And so as a leader, I often sit my team down, we talk about our goals, we talk about the adjustments we have to make so we're not so fixed on what we have to do right now that we can't be agile enough to make adjustments for it. And then we talk about how we're going to change the future proactively, not reactively. I never want to be the leader who's saying we're only going to focus on the things that have worked for us in the past. When history shows, and I'm talking about for centuries, history shows that as things evolve, you're either going to be relevant because you stayed ahead of the curve, or you're going to become obsolete because you were so fearful of making a change that you never did anything to get prepared for the future.
It sounds like a mindset shift really needs to happen first. And I love how you mentioned potential and being proactive, because if you are reactive, you're not necessarily prepared. And then you also mentioned the word agile. And for anyone that knows me, especially right now, I just love that word. I love agile, capital A. I love agile, lowercase a. And the understanding that we do live in that VUCA world where everything is volatile and uncertain and complex. And we have the ambiguity surrounding the future. If we reverse that into a positive mindset, it sounds like we can approach the future boldly with minimal fear. Maybe we still have a little anxiety, but minimal fear surrounding that. So I'm curious, Latasha, do you have a particular mindset that you've adopted, or do you have a framework that you like to use to help structure change and structure that with your team?
So, I am always a promoter of the growth mindset. It's not just being positive, but it's also embracing the fact that we won't know everything. And the best way to stay ready is to be open to learning new things. So I've shared this with people. If I could get paid to just learn for a living, that would be my profession of choice. Offer me a class in basket weaving, I will take it. Probably not because it's gonna, lead to my future state, right? But because in my experience, I've had the opportunity to learn how to be interdisciplinary. So, one of the things I'll share, and this kind of goes back to my origin story, if you will. Growing up, it wasn't necessarily expected that inner city kids had very high graduation rates, and then you add on other layers, and the numbers diminish significantly, right? So, you've got this teenage mom who graduated top 10 in her class, by the way, and on time. So, we got over that hurdle, right? And that became it was very much never in question in my mind whether or not I would get over that hurdle. It may have been statistically not in my favor, but in my mind, it was I've done so many things already. And whether it was through my own doing or God's grace, these things keep happening. Why would I question whether or not I can do this? My mindset is always focused on how do I make this happen? Not, oh man, I can't do that. It's virtually impossible. But okay, if this is to happen under these circumstances with these parameters, how do I make this happen? Right. So, you know, I went on to get I actually got two bachelor's degrees. Don't judge me. I saw an opportunity and they hadn't changed the rules yet. And I said, well, if I just have to take a few more classes to get this dual degree, I'm doing it. Right. I went on to get a master's in IT. And I then went on to get a doctoral degree in education. And all of that was fueled by how do I make this happen? These are my circumstances, right? I've got my munchkin. I've got to make sure we take care, she's taken care of, and that we take care of what we need to take care of, right? The house and all that jazz, the stuff that normal people have to worry about. How do I make sure that stuff still happens? While furthering my education, while furthering my growth mindset, while learning if you gave me an opportunity, great. If the opportunity didn't present itself, I created my own opportunities. I was probably most notorious for saying, "Okay, well, can I meet with you for a few minutes? I just wanna learn more about what you do and how I can help you, like, if there's anything I can do to add value and blah, blah, blah." I would sit with non-clients who then became clients. Why? Because I could learn what they did and how that might be pulled together with all the other disciplines I've learned about. and figure out how I could uniquely add value in those circumstances. So while I haven't, I guess, officially put terminology to this, I guess I would say keep an open growth mindset at all times. Create opportunities if they're not presenting themselves to you, you create them for yourself and not subscribing to what other people think you will be, right? So again, I mentioned statistically there were a lot of odds stacked against me. I did not allow that to define who I was and what I was going to pursue or how I was going to take ownership of how my life shaped up and what I was able to do to add value, right? So, if you help other people, creating opportunities oftentimes comes with you helping other people, adding value for them. People are big on, I care because I know you care, right? John Maxwell says that all the time. No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. But those would be the 3 things, and I'm hesitant to say them again, but I'm gonna try to really, really quickly. The 3 things would be maintain an open growth mindset, create your own opportunities if you need to. Don't think that just because you don't see them openly that you can't create your own, and don't allow other people to define you and define what you're capable of. You take ownership of that and drive it on your own. Be intentional about that.
I think that is so important, Latasha, for everyone to understand too, because especially the third one, because oftentimes I see people, I'm sure you've felt this given your history, and I've felt this in other ways as well, that people will put us in a box and they will label us. And sometimes labels can be very helpful in understanding how you might contribute to something or understanding your role and the scope of it and your responsibility. However, in situations like you're mentioning, where people look at numbers and they make an assumption and they try to define you, or they place your value on your job or your resume, and they fail to understand both the hard and the soft skills that you can contribute to add value. So I want to emphasize and highlight what you just said so people really hear your advice and take that to heart, because I feel like it's so important. We all have so much value to give, and there seems to be a need for other people to be open-minded and accepting that help and that support and that value. However, sometimes, when we are met with change, I know there can be that great resistance, and whether it's a team member or even maybe leadership might be scared to change and to adapt. I certainly can see that in technology and AI and how we navigate through those kind of changes. How do you help a team member overcome the resistance, or how do you as a leader move forward in the face of that resistance?
I like keeping my team grounded in their native gifts. I don't want you to worry about what you don't have. I don't want you to focus on what your perceived weaknesses are. Is not to say that you shouldn't try to enhance your opportunities. If you have opportunities to be better in a space, by all means, and it's an area that you're committed to, by all means, take whatever steps you feel comfortable in enhancing those. But I think oftentimes as leaders, it's easy to get locked into what you'd like your team members to be doing versus what they are natively great at. So, for example, I've got one team member who, over the years, and I shared this with her yesterday, so I feel very comfortable singing her praises and her growth over the last several years. But I've known her and I've seen her grow and evolve so much in the last 6, 7 years that we've known each other. She went from someone who had a wealth of knowledge about the business. I mean, she had been in spots that allowed her to be in rooms with other people. She didn't have titles. She was there as a support in a support structure, but her insights and her understanding of the business made her a valuable player because her leaders would look to her and say, what do you think about this?" And she had grown comfortable with these people. They had established trust. She knew that they cared about her, that they had her back, that if she needed anything, that she could go to them, and by extension, if they needed anything, they could go to her. And that's the type of relationship she and I have. But when she joined my team, she was new to not just my team, but to our function. So she went from a very operational role to an L&D role, and this was not her background. And for her, she just kept getting stuck on, "Well, I don't know training." Like, "I know business, but I don't know training." And I kept her focused on that. "You're right. You know business. You can learn the training components. You can learn about adult learning theory. You can learn how to package things in a way that optimize the learning experience for people. But what you know about the business and the insights that comes with that, it could take me forever to get someone else to the same place that you are." So one of the things I want them to know is your native gift is a value. Let's play that up. Let's focus on that. The other thing I like to do is because of their native gifts, I like to think through like what is the best assignment for this team member. It's not to say that if you've got, a huge project, it's like, well, this person is really great at just this one thing, so they're only going to be able to do this one thing on this project. That is not what I'm advocating. People still have to be, I think, stretched in a healthy way to allow them to continue to grow and evolve. But if I know that you are the person who has a keen eye for detail and there's a project that's coming up that requires your unique skill set, I'm gonna welcome you to the team on this one, and I'm gonna promote you. I'm gonna make sure people know that you're the brain baby behind all the genius that comes with the value and the work and the output and the quality that comes with it. And so what I've found this team member doing over the last couple of years now, not always voluntarily and oftentimes reluctantly, because again, it's bringing people along. But, in those areas that she's great at, she can now speak to that herself because I'm very vocal. I'm always giving kudos. Hey, you are amazing at these things. And oftentimes as leaders, we don't necessarily give enough feedback either. Like, you can't wait once a year when it's time to do, performance reviews, and then all of a sudden it's like, "Hey, by the way, you did great on this, but you had some opportunities here." Not only is that unfair to the team member because you didn't give them an opportunity to, course correct throughout the year, but you also stunted their growth throughout the year, right? They could have been miles ahead of where they would have been had you proactively shared the feedback. And so in the areas where there are opportunities, and again, I believe in healthy stretching, I have taken my team members and I have walked them into situations that allow them to grow. So, for example, this particular team member is not keen on public speaking, but she has so much to say and she's so respected. And so I've made sure that when opportunities where someone might ask me, "Hey, could you come speak at this town hall?" Actually, I'm not going to be available for that, but I have a team member who would be amazing for that. And then we do all the things that would make her comfortable leading up to it, right? Do you want to rehearse? Do you want to review your talking points with me? Is there data that you think you're gonna need that we can maybe help massage together? Do you need help figuring out how to tell this story? We do all the things that help your team members get better and get comfortable because the more you do things, undoubtedly the better you get at them. Like no one starts off, everybody starts off as a novice. No one starts off as an expert. So those are some of the things that I've made a point of doing to help my team kind of navigate the changes and especially when it comes to their own personal and professional growth.
That's a great way to lift others up to and wonderful example of how do you challenge someone without putting them in a bad stress situation because you're also not letting that team member go off and do something without your guidance. You're saying, "Hey, I'm going to help you. Here's what I can do to set you up for success. You get the practice now so that you can become the expert." I think that's just a great example of leadership, let alone how to help navigate change. There's something that you said that brought another question to mind, actually, two thoughts. So I'll start with this one. One, I'm seeing the parallel between learning and navigating change or handling change management. Is that something you've considered too?
Absolutely, absolutely, and it tickles me because sometimes the line is so fine that you have to really have a good, strong partnership with your change management leads to make sure that you're not crossing paths, right? And that something isn't being left on the table that needs to be addressed. But one of the things, because my entire team has been through change management training, they are all certified as L&D professionals to use the same change management model that our change management professionals use. And I saw that as not only an opportunity, but necessary because let's say, for example, you don't have a change leader. Typically, when people come to you for training, they're coming to you to influence a behavior, to help people adopt a skill set, to be able to do something different. And from an instructional design perspective, I have to step back and think about it. What would make you wanna do this change? Like, well, okay, I could bake all of this training and I can put a little bow on it and make it exactly what you want it to be, but I still have to make it attractive enough for you to say, "I'm willing to take it," or "I'm willing to apply it," right? And so, the model we typically use is ADKAR, and it's just one of many change management models, but we use that. I encourage my team to think through it even from a design standpoint. So before we develop anything, what are we creating awareness for? What is it that we need our team members to know and understand in order for us to create the desire to take the training, to consume it, to do whatever it is that we're asking them to do once they've done it? And then the knowledge piece is usually the training piece, right? So that's like us.
Yeah.
We have to think through, what are our learning objectives? What do we want our team members to be able to do after they've taken this training? And how do we design and develop it in a way that allows them to do that? And then, of course, you have the ability piece for ADKAR, right? How am I gauging their abilities? So now that they've taken this training, what do the leaders need to be looking for in order to say, yes, they know exactly what they're doing and they learned everything they needed to learn from the training? Or well, this was a potential gap in the training, right? We still need them to do this. They know how to do this, but I just realized we didn't touch on this, right? So, how do we get them upskilled to be able to do what we need them to do? And then the last part is just us making sure we check in, that we're checking to see if, how are you feeling about this? How do we acknowledge the progress you've made in this? What do we need to do to keep the feedback loop going, right? For us, this process is pretty well woven into what we have to do to be thoughtful, mindful, and learning professionals who are adding value to our teams.
I love that you have that structure and that framework. I think ADKAR is really great, something that I've been learning more about myself. And I can see the value in having that as a structure, especially starting with awareness, because I was talking to somebody else about the need for self awareness as a leader. And you as a team have to be able to say, this is the reality that we're in, too. I think that if you avoid what is realistic, it's really hard to know where you're going. Would you disagree with that or have additional thoughts?
No, you're hitting it right on the head. So, one of the 15 invaluable laws of growth is one of the very first ones is awareness, right? Is understanding where you are. If you're trying to get somewhere, you have to know where you are in order to get there, right? Like if you think about your GPS, a map of any sort, yes, you're gonna see the location you're trying to get to, but if you don't know where you are, you don't know what direction to go in, how far you're gonna have to go, maybe how much toll money there's all types of readiness and preparation that comes with you needing to understand exactly where you are in order to figure out how to get to where you're going. But in addition to that, a lack of awareness will also unfortunately create a situation where you don't understand potential reluctance,
Mm.
or oftentimes, and I'll use technology as an example, as much as I thought AI would take off exponentially in the L&D space, I still know a lot more reluctant professionals than I do who are proactively engaged. And part of that is because they have fears. They have legitimate fears. And those fears don't go away just because you move forward with the change, right? I mean, how many times have you heard about a technology that's been implemented that no one uses? Well, I don't use it because this other thing is still available to me, number one. and I know how to use it. I can use it much faster than I can this new thing you just made me learn. I don't have time to learn this new thing, right? But you still expect me to get the work done. You have to create awareness so that you can then create a situation where you can talk through what are your thoughts. Change management to me is really bringing people along. That doesn't mean just on your terms, right? So bringing you along means I have to engage you and say, hey, where are you with this? What are your thoughts, concerns, feedback about what we're doing? And that means taking the good, bad, and other with it because there's a lot of legitimacy to the fears that people voice. And then as part of your change plan, you need to figure out how am I going to address this resistance? Do I need to engage change advocates, right? Maybe peers who can speak to, hey, I know you have this concern, but I've been exposed to this and I see so many benefits. Can I sit down and can I talk to you about it? Do you need sponsors, right? Not just people who have titles, because I know a lot more people with more influence, but no title, right? And that's what leadership is. Leadership is nothing more than influence. So, do I need to get sponsors, people that everyone will really listen to and trust? Because I know you have my best interest at heart, who can then sit down and say, let me explain to you why this is needed. And then the last thing I'll add about that from an awareness standpoint is I heard someone describe the difference between honesty and transparency recently, and I've embraced it. I love it. She described it and she used a scenario. She said, honesty is if I ask you what's happening and you tell me the truth, right? You're being honest. But transparency is I'm coming to you and I'm proactively telling you what's happening. And then I'm engaging you in that way. Do you see the difference there? Right? I can be honest, but I had to ask you about it. Or I can be transparent, and people are desperate for transparent leadership. And that transparency will get you all types of benefits when it comes to navigating change because your team members will know, okay, I can trust you because you're not just being honest. You're not just figuring out which pieces of information you can divulge or want to divulge to me. You're bringing me along. And so I'll go along with you. You're giving them the choice.
I love that. The proactive nature of that, I feel like that alleviates a lot of fear in teams if you do proactively approach them with the context, with the transparency. That helps create, I feel, psychological safety really comes down to communication at the heart of it. What are your thoughts on, expanding on that idea? What are your thoughts on building psychological safety in a heavily changing environment, I should say?
Absolutely. People have to be able to trust, again, that you have their best interest at heart. And I know I've referenced John Maxwell a lot, but,
We both
when you're
love
on a
him.
roll, you're on a roll. And so John Maxwell says, many communicate, few connect. Mm, few connect, right? Communication, there's an old saying that it is oftentimes the one thing that is rarely happening, but we often think it is because by virtue of us talking, right? I've said words, you've received the words I said, right? But they may not have landed in the way that you needed them to land or that I needed them to land in order for you to understand the real situation, right? And if I'm being honest, even if I'm using words that make sense, if you have not connected with me, really gotten to the heart of what matters to me, it doesn't really matter what you say because I can take what you say and I can kind of make it how I hear it is how I'm going to hear it. So, for example, if I'm a leader who's typically transparent and I offer information as it's becoming available to me in a way that allows you to make informed decisions for yourself, when I bring you information, you're probably looking at it through that lens. So, whatever words I'm using at that point, you can receive them because you know the spirit from which they're coming from. But if you've ever lacked transparency as a leader, you leave it open for people to say, in the past, you haven't always told me everything. So even though you're telling me this and I heard the words you used, I'm not sure. I'm still thinking about the things that you didn't tell me. What didn't you tell me, right? And that wasn't the intent. as the leader, right? But that is the outcome because you did not connect, right? So communication is big, but not just communication in the sense of I've really sat down and thought about the words I want to use to make me sound like a leader. Or like I'm very big on telling my team if I don't know, hey, that's a great question. I got no clue. Let me see what I can dig up. And they respect that, right? If something changes, the first thing I do is let them know, hey, I know that this is what we talked about before, but I just got wind that this is what's happening now. And I want to sit down and talk to you about what you're hearing, how this makes you feel, and what support I can offer you. I am connecting before anything. That is the first part of the message in my mind. It's not about the words I'm going to use, it's how am I going to connect with you to make sure that you can trust and receive what I've shared with you. And to me, that's really the heart of communication. How am I connecting before my word choice is prioritized?
It sounds so much like the trust gets lost when you lack that transparency, and when, to your point, you leave something out, then people are going to feel like you're not telling them the whole story. So how can you have that connection?
How do I know? How do I trust the next time that you communicate something to me that I was front of mind for you? And I know that that's very difficult for a lot of leaders because unfortunately, status quo in a lot of organizations is really what's promoted, right? I think we're in a space where we have a courage crisis. It is not always easy to be the person who questions the norm. He says, I know everyone else is doing it this way. They're communicating this and this. They're using the exact, they have been scripted, and that is what they are going to say. It takes a lot of courage to go off script, to say, I care enough about my team members. I understand my responsibility as a leader, and I'm not abdicating that responsibility. And understand that what I may be getting ready to share with them may be difficult for them to hear, receive in any way. However, if I am really a steward over these folks, it is my responsibility. I am accountable to sharing the right information with them and sharing it in a way that allows them to feel cared for. And if I'm dropping the ball there, it's very hard, especially when we talk about integrity. It's very difficult to maintain the appearance of integrity when your walk and your talk don't match up. So if I tell my team I care and I have an opportunity to show them in a way that I know is not going to set well with them, but I need them to know I care enough to put myself out there to allow them to be able to do, and even if it's just sharing, like if you need to vent, I'm your safe space. But if I never allow myself the chance to do that with them, I can't reasonably expect them to really trust that I have their back and that I care, and that means my walk and my talk aren't matching up.
Actions speak louder than words, and when those two don't align, it's really hard to have the for them to have the confidence in you, right?
That's right, and it's difficult to overcome. Once you have been pegged as someone who may be lacking integrity, it's not that you can't overcome it, but research suggests it's extremely difficult. I'm not just talking about obviously the big no-nos when it comes to integrity. I'm not talking about like you got caught stealing from the company or sharing trade secrets or anything like that. Integrity is integrity. Going back to the Bible, if I can't trust you with a little, I can't trust you with a lot.
Absolutely. There's something else that comes to mind when it comes to communication, especially in change management, and the need to be proactive of who do you take information to first, second, third, or do you take it to an individual first? Do you take it to a group? And I don't want to assume, but I'm sure that part of the answer is, well, it depends on the change. But what is your thought philosophy around who needs to hear what first and how you navigate the decision behind that?
So it depends. But I'd say that the way that I discern it is it depends on the impact and how the impact will play out with the team. So, for example, I'm a huge advocate of bringing your leaders in first, of a leader first approach. I find that There are times that leaders at different levels get different information. Sometimes they get the information at the same time that their team does. And that's unfortunate because as a leader, and again, if I take full ownership of stewarding over my people, then I want to be able to support them. But it's difficult for me to do that if I'm processing it at the same time that they're processing it. I'm an advocate of a leader first approach. When it comes to my individual team members, if there are folks on my team who are going to be affected first, I just feel like out of an abundance of respect, I am going to pull you to the side because I want you to have an opportunity to be vulnerable and to react and to process and to think through any questions you might have about it, anything that I can possibly do to help with the change. I want you to be able to provide that first. And then that might dictate how long before I share the rest of that information with the rest of the team, right? Because again, I don't expect people, sometimes you are in an overnight situation where you have to make a decision overnight and it is what it is. But there are oftentimes opportunities that we just don't take advantage of as leaders. I don't believe in checking the box. So I'm not going to just, well, got that done. I talked to everybody, right? I want you, if I can't lay my head down at night knowing that I did everything I could possibly do to help you process and navigate the change as best as you could, I don't like losing sleep. I'm not the best person with shorter hours. So I do what I can to make sure that that doesn't happen.
That's such a great understanding of human need and caring for your team too, because you're right. I don't want to assume you've been in that position, but personally have been in a position where as a leader, I might be hearing some news at the same time as my team and trying to make sense of it and understand it now to guide other people. And being a human myself, having to figure out what's my understanding of the context. What does this mean for us? Now, how do I help other people navigate that? So I wholeheartedly agree. But we align on so much already, Latasha, but that's something that definitely resonates. I'm glad you shared that too, because the decision has to come down to, from what I'm hearing, it has to come down to who does it impact? And that gets back to caring for your people as a leader and thinking about them through the change. There's something else that makes me curious. I've certainly experienced a lot of change and I've seen how it can affect a team in a way where they feel demotivated to continue the current work. And you said something earlier about remembering what's the value that we're giving now in the present. So, how do you navigate holding people accountable to the present and what the work and the deliverables or the project is that they need to accomplish now, while also maintaining that growth mindset and bringing people along?
So, full transparency, I believe in crucial conversations. If I sense that a team member has checked out, I'm probably going to say, hey, how's it going today? Something seems a little off. Could just be me, but I want to talk through it with you. How are you feeling today? And I do probe because if you've been working with people for any length of time and you've established strong enough relationships with them to be able to sense something, even if you can't put a name or label on it, I think it's our responsibility as humans, not just as leaders, to check in. And I mean, like, genuinely check in. Don't ask someone how they're doing and then immediately tune out and go back to whatever other distraction you might have been involved in. So that means checking in with yourself to see if you're in a space to make sure to receive whatever it is that they might share. Because they could drop something heavy on you that's not even work related, right? It's a change in their life, but make sure you're prepared mentally to support them before you ask the question. But I do. I believe in crucial conversations and just, asking. The other thing that I am big on is modeling. You have to be the leader that you want, to have. And, and I encourage my team to do that as well. So there's two ways to do that. I focus on the work as well, and I make sure I call out the significance of the contributions. When you do this the way it needs to be done, this is how it affects our end user or our client. This is how it, positively impacts the business. So this is the significance, and this is your unique, gift that you're leaning into with this that makes this even more significant. So I make sure that I'm keeping the right focus on what we have to do in the immediate, sense. But I also open it up for my team to do the same thing. Tell me what you think the significance of this is. And so me modeling it doesn't just mean me sharing or demonstrating what it should look like. It's me welcoming my team and their added collective voices to say, what does this look like to you? Right. And giving them a platform. Oftentimes, because you have such diverse perspectives, someone will mention something and you go, oh, yeah, you know what? I hadn't even thought about that one. That's a good one. We should add it to the list. Right. And so if you manage your team in a way that allows them to focus on the right things, just like conversely, if let's say you're in that situation where you didn't get the information before your team got it, you got it at the same time. Oftentimes, as leaders, whether you necessarily agree with the direction that's being given or not, the expectation is that you are going to be a leader and you are going to show up accordingly, right? You're not going to badmouth the decision. You're going to, you just have to figure out how you're going to navigate that. And so if you are more inclined, and I'm not suggesting that you lie to your team, you should be transparent with them. I've been known to say, "Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about this change yet," or "There's something I'm processing still with you guys, but some of the thoughts that come to mind initially are X, Y, Z." But be mindful of how you're presenting that information because as a leader, you have the ability to make something positive and a value added experience, or you can make it negative and you can keep the focus on the things that you don't need your team focusing on.
Wow, that's great. I feel like you just taught me something here too, Latasha, because we know to get insight from our team, hopefully, as leaders, we know to get insight from our team and to receive feedback and help guide them to answers. But I've never heard anyone recommend asking the team what their impact is and what they perceive that to be. Because you're right, we can model it as much as we want and have those conversations so they understand the value they give. But what do they think the value that they give is? So I'm going to steal that and use that because I love that so much. That's such a great, great
And it's
point.
empowering.
And well, you may,
Yeah.
oh, yeah. Yeah, empowerment for sure. You mentioned a lot of great things. I feel like we could just unpack so much, but how do you empower others when you are dealing with that uncertainty and you want to make sure that they do still have a voice and that they are still heard? Because to some of the multiple points you've made, you need your team to be able to give that feedback. It's not just simply you telling people what to do through change.
So it's funny you asked that. I'm probably not going to share a very popular approach, although I would love to see it popularized. I like the Chick-fil-A model when it comes to your teams. I have never heard anyone say that they went to a bad Chick-fil-A. Now, if you have, my apologies, but I don't think that's their intent. I think their intent is to make sure that no matter who you get your service from, no matter what location, that there is consistency in the value that's being added and in the experience you have. And so when I lead my team, that is my primary focus. I am not the primary focus. I have seen situations where leaders will say, it's not about who did the work. It's about showing the overarching value of the team. And don't get me wrong, I understand the perspective. They want to make sure that if change were to occur, there's no confusing where the value collectively is coming from. But I believe in building my team members up. I feel like that's my legacy as a leader. If you are able to have a positive experience with all of my team members and get great service from them, it may not be the same exact way you got it from me, right? It may the way that I approach things is going to be different from how other people approach it. And so I tell my team all the time, I do not want you to get hung up in, well, Latasha would do it this way. Yeah, because that's Latasha, right? I want
Yeah.
you to
Yeah.
bring your native gift to this, but I want you to keep the customer, the client front of mind. And if you do that, if you really think through what is it that they need, what is it that they haven't considered, don't be afraid to mention the things that they haven't really thought, maybe they haven't thought about. Because a lot of times clients, especially in L&D, they think, oh, I need training to solve this problem. And One of the first things my team does as part of our process is we do an intake and we have a conversation. So tell me more about this. Why do you think this is the problem? What should be happening that's not happening? What are some of your best performers doing versus what are others doing? What do you think might be driving that? Has everyone had this experience? Did everyone get the training initially? Did it like understand and make yourself an extension of the partner? And for me, because that's my priority, my thing is if I walk away, because who knows when my next assignment might be, God might be telling me to go, to Mars and help, the baby aliens. I don't know. But whatever happens, right? I want to make sure my team feels confident in what they're capable of doing. And I want our clients and our partners to feel the same confidence that they know what they're doing, that there's credibility there. And as long as they do that, I feel like my legacy as a leader is solid. I don't need to be on every stage. I don't need to be in every meeting. I don't need to be the one exchanging communications all the time. I don't. I've had enough of that in my experience to know that my credibility is solid. How do I make sure my team is uplifted and seen in the same way?
I love that so much. It reminds me of something somebody else shared with me, and I've heard in other ways over the years that you want to make yourself obsolete so that you're growing your team. They can take over your role to in their own way and capacity to your point, and then you're then freed up for higher level priorities, different role shift, whatever that might be. And that's a great you just outlined a really great example of how to be able to do that too. It's so wonderful. You know, it makes me think it can be really tiresome for leaders. We get either decision fatigue or change fatigue, whatever kind of fatigue you want to call it, as we're leading our teams and guiding them. How do you help yourself as a leader to take a mental break or to just recognize when, you mentioned about approaching conversations and making sure you're mentally ready. How do you give yourself some kindness, or what do you do to manage yourself through that change as a leader?
So self-care for me is carving out the time I need to learn and grow. As long as I'm learning, I have something I can give to my team. That's how I look at it. So even if that means I'm getting up at 5 o'clock, and right now I'm getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, but I'm reconsidering the 5 o'clock. I'm like, should I get up at 4?
When are you going to bed is the real question if you're getting up.
And that is a conversation my husband and I'm sure will have because, his quality time is his love language, and I can see him saying, "So when are we gonna watch everything in the DVR? If you're asleep by 9, by 8 o'clock every night." But I do believe as leaders, we have to constantly be committed to learning, and that is one of the things that makes me feel solid because when my team has a question and I've equipped myself with a new perspective or even just a tried but true perspective that is applicable in our situation, I feel more confident in helping us navigate the changes in the situations that might be occurring. I think in addition to that, creating capacity for yourself means figuring out what the real priorities are. And I know we don't like that word. In fact, I heard that priority used to be singular and then someone came along and added an IES to it. And I don't know who did that, but they were dead wrong for it. Especially since it is so hard to figure out what I should be focusing on if everything is a priority, right? If everything's a priority, then by definition to me, then nothing is because I can't possibly give my best self to everything. But then, as an extension of that, I think reminding everyone that perfection is not the answer either. Maybe there are multiple important and urgent things that need to occur. There is a good, better, best way to approach things. And I think my team in particular, like we are all for like, I'll figure it out. I will spend hours trying to figure it out before I reach out to my client to ask, do you have the answer to this? Because I didn't want to reach out and I didn't want to disturb you. And I'm like, listen, I need everyone to be on the team of we work better together. We can do this better together. So sometimes that may mean if I had a little bit more time or a few more resources, I could give you this. But given our, situation, I can still do this because this is what's needed and it will fit our need. Are you okay with that? Right? Being okay to create capacity by not being so tied to perfectionism. And then I think as leaders, we just have to be okay with delegating too. And I mean delegating effectively because there was a point in time where I was a little bummed because projects would only come to me after they had crashed. And I get questions like, "Hey, we did this training on it." And I'm like, "Okay, I don't know who did the training. This didn't come from us. I'd like to help me understand how we got here, right?" And it made me realize, like, I wasn't being brought in, right, to be able to contribute meaningfully. Well, then I started getting brought in, but I was being brought in on everything. And I'm like, "I can't be in 3 meetings at one time, people, like, we share calendars. I know you said I can't be." And, in the book, The Upside of Disruption by Terrence Maury, he mentions that he describes it as bureaucratic BS because especially since the pandemic, I think we can all agree we're probably in back-to-back meetings all day long, and those of us who work virtually, you still don't get, a reprieve. Someone might say, "Oh, what are you doing for lunch today?" And I'm like, "What is that? Lunch," right? And I've come to the point where I realize again, going back to that the courage crisis that I think we're experiencing, you've got to be okay with saying lunch should be a thing because I can't give you my best possible self if I get no breaks throughout the day, or I don't fuel myself in a way that allows me to lean in and even pay attention. I mean, statistically, you see the stats on kids who go to school and who can't focus because they're not properly fed, right? So, as adults, we still need proper sleep, proper nutrition, and all that jazz, and so, trusting your team enough to show up to the meetings that need to be shown up to prioritize or help them prioritize, right? You may need to say, "Hey, this thing right here is more pressing than this thing right here. And so what can I do to provide you air cover?" I don't mind being the bad guy. Let me be the bad guy. If I need to reach out to one of our clients and say, "Hey, so and so is so excited about this project. They can't wait to get started on it, but this came down the pike. And so we really need to pivot towards it right now. But that looks like it's an adjustment in our timeline by this. Please let me know if you have any questions about it." I'm happy to do that. But yeah, you gotta prioritize and you gotta delegate effectively and you gotta commit time to continuously learn so that you can pick up on nifty little tactics like that
Yeah.
to help you gain time and be able to grow your team.
That in itself is a mini lesson that you can take to your team too and help them navigate the fatigue as well. Because you're right, those of us that work remote, it doesn't really let up since COVID. It has been the back to back meetings or, the assumption that maybe you have the time because you don't have to commute or you travel from one office to the other or you're brought in or you're left out. I think you and I might have talked about this before too, the inclusion or exclusion factor of being remote and people not knowing what's going on in the work environment or not being remembered or thought of. And so you make some really wonderful points. I hope people take note of that too, Latasha, because not only is it how do you take care of yourself, but how do you include and make sure that other people are taking care of themselves as
And
well?
if I can just add one
Really
more,
valuable.
because something you just said
Yeah.
sparked this one, but there was a point in time where I used to love my commute because I would listen to audiobooks. And my brain, the way it's wired, it plays out like a movie on the windshield, right? You got the sky and you could almost see with every word that's being narrated, everything that's happening. I started commuting with my husband, and at one point I found myself not engaging in my audiobooks, which were always like some type of thriller, right? I was now checking my phone or I was trying to squeeze in some work. And I think this goes back to the courage factor. You can't be on all the time. Burnout is real. And so reclaim some of that time that you may think you're gaining a leg up because, oh, I just repurposed this so I can get more work done. Getting more work done doesn't make you more productive. Being busy doesn't mean productivity, doesn't mean outcomes, doesn't yield results all the time, especially if it leads to you being burned out and unable to do any of the other things. If you wind up sick all the time, you might want to question, am I giving myself enough rest? Or am I constantly trying to find ways to stay plugged in, to stay ahead, or to stay in the race with everyone else? At some point, you have to dial it back and be okay with the race that you're intended to run versus the race that everybody else is running. Otherwise, you might run yourself into the ground.
Absolutely. It's that law of diminishing returns, right? We don't become more productive the longer that we go at it. We actually deteriorate, or physically, we can deteriorate and get sick. Our minds can get overwhelmed with all the constant barrage of communication coming at us. It can really lead to burnout. So you make some really important points, no matter whether you're going through change or you're leading a team through, say, normal times, but we know that change is constant. So I hope people take note of that as well. I'm curious, I want to be mindful of your time, Latasha, but if you allow me one more question, what would you say are the top skills that a leader needs to develop and improve to be able to lead their team through change?
I would start with being reflective, carving out the time. Right now, we're so go, go, go that I don't know very many people who say, hey, I actually intentionally carve out the time to sit down and reflect on everything that's happening so that I can put the appropriate words with the messaging that I'm responsible for. Right now, the lack of reflection, I think, is leading to more reactivity than proactivity. I've always said, like, I don't wanna be reactive. I wanna be responsive. I wanna know that how I'm responding is meeting the need, is answering the question. And I can't do that if I don't take a moment to reflect on where I am today, which goes back to something we talked about earlier. As leaders, we need to know where we are today and figure out where we need to take our teams for the workforce of tomorrow. Again, the word future fit comes to mind. And it's very difficult to do that with intentionality if you don't take the time to say, this is where we are. How do we need to reskill, upskill? What do we need to unlearn? Being willing to unlearn the things that didn't, they may have worked before. And so for that, we say thank you. But, um, it doesn't make sense to keep wearing the same old worn out shoes and expecting to be able to make the trek that you have to make today or tomorrow, right? At some point, you say, "Thank you for your service." You retire them, and you figure out, "What do I need today to get me to where I need to go tomorrow?" And bringing your team along on that journey, I think, is essential because they're undoubtedly gonna need to be upskilled, reskilled, they're gonna have to unlearn some things. Being okay with, "Hey, we're all figuring it out at the same time, but let me," my last and third one, "embrace whatever comes with that, even if it means failure." I think we need to change the connotation of the word failure. It is not a bad thing. Edison did not know that, that umpteenth time that finally led to electricity was gonna lead to electricity. He didn't look at it and say, "Oh, I keep failing, so I should just stop." He took the failure and he learned from it. And I think people have to learn how to embrace failure differently as well as fear. Fear does not go away. We're all scared of something. May not be the same things, but even if it's I'm scared to do this for the first time, guess what? Everybody has to do something for the first time. Right? So looking at those two F words differently will help a lot of leaders not only help their teams navigate change in the future, but also help them, build the skill sets, whatever it is that they're going to need in order to be effective leaders and change agents.
Such wise words, Latasha. It's been such a treat to get to chat with you again and hear all of your wisdom and insight. I know that we will have many more conversations. I hope we will. And I'd love to have you back because I feel like we could have another part two, part three, part four. However, you have your own podcast that I want people to go and listen to where you share and you have wonderful guests that share all of their wealth of knowledge when it comes to business and leadership and learning. So, where can this audience go and find you and connect with you?
Absolutely. So I am Latasha Nelson, comma PhD on LinkedIn, and my podcast is Thanks for Coming Back, inspired by something I tell my team all the time. I don't care if it's Friday and all of a sudden on Monday I say thanks for coming back. They're like, it's just the weekend. Hey, you made a choice. So I appreciate you choosing to come back. Thanks for coming back is on every major platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. So whether you look it up under Thanks for Coming Back or you look for it under Learning Leader Lab, you will be able to find it. You can also go to Learning Leader Lab on LinkedIn for awesome articles and clips from all of our episodes, from all of the awesome people who have been very gracious in sharing their insights and their experiences. And the last thing I'll just share is that, the intent of all of these forums is to really help prepare the leaders of tomorrow. So whether you have a title or not, to me, it does not make a difference. You have the opportunity to be a leader and have the influence and impact in the space that you're currently serving in. And if that is something you want to continue to get great at, because everyone can learn to be a great leader, check us out. We are very happy and reach out and let us know if you use any of the tips and all of the knowledge that's shared and how we can best serve you.
I love it, Latasha. I love what you're doing. And thank you for helping our audience here as we all try to level up our leadership. I know I have, and it's been a real treat for me. So thank you for the honor and privilege of coming on to my podcast. I hope that you will come back again. But in the meantime, thank you to our audience on the Bad Bosses Great Leaders podcast. Please check out Latasha and all the wonderful insight that she and her guests had to share. And thank you all so much for joining us.